Hello, everyone. I'm Leah Hines, executive of the Charleston Conference, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar today. Is it really publishing? The why and how of library publishing initiatives. Thank you for joining us today. While everybody's connecting and joining us, could you take just a few minutes in the attendee chat and just let us know who you are and where you're from? Give us your name and maybe your institution or your company, just to give us an idea of who's in the audience. And I'm also going to get a quick poll question. Hi, Elizabeth from Radford University, to see how you would describe yourself as an attendee. So let's get this going. Hello, everyone. Lots and lots of people commenting there. So here's the poll. How would you describe yourself? Librarian, publisher, student, other. And if you select other, could you give us how you would describe yourself in the chat there to tell us what the other category might be? Lots of librarians here. Scholarly communication librarian, consortium officer, another consortium director, MLS working in publishing. Scholarly communications assistant with an institutional repository came in from the presenter Q&A. Okay, well, lots of different. Okay, what looks like about 68% librarian, 11% publisher, 0 students, 23%, 24% other, still coming in. Give everybody a few more minutes to comment there, but I think it's kind of wrapping up. While people are still commenting, just a few pieces of business here. The webinar is scheduled to last for about 60 minutes. The presentation portion will last roughly 45, leaving 15 minutes for Q&A. We're going to save all the questions for the end. So if you have a question at any point during the presentation, you can leave it in the attendee chat box, or you can use the green question mark icon that says Ask the Presenter a Question. Matthew Ismail, who is head of collection development at Central Michigan University and editor-in-chief of the Charleston Briefings, will be moderating the session. He'll be handling the Q&A portion. Let's see here. This session is being recorded, and the video and slides will be made available on the Charleston Conference website within a few days. We'll send an email to everyone who's registered to let you know when it's there. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Matthew. Close the poll here. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Leah. As Leah said, I'm Matthew Ismail. I'm the Director of Collection Development at Central Michigan University. And as the Editor-in-Chief of the Charleston Briefings, I had the pleasure to work with Sarah Kalikman Lippincott. Now, the Charleston Briefings, the topic or the series upon which this book is based, is called Charleston Briefings, Trending Topics for Information Professionals. The Charleston Briefings are brief books on topics of interest to people who attend the Charleston Conference, whether librarians, publishers, or vendors. And the briefings basically seek to present important topics in a lean and efficient manner so that busy professionals can get a good grounding in a topic in a reasonable amount of time. I like to think of them as being to business books what novellas are to novels. Now, the Charleston Briefings are open access and free to read, thanks to our various sponsors. In particular, today we would like to thank Gale, a Cengage company, for sponsoring Library as Publisher, New Models of Scholarly Communication for a New Era by Sarah Lippincott. Which brings me to the presenters for today's webcast, which is based on Sarah's briefing. Sarah, would you and Isaac like to introduce yourselves?
Great. Thank you, Matthew. I'm Sarah Lippincott. I'm a librarian turned scholarly communications and digital scholarship consultant. I was the inaugural program director of the Library Publishing Coalition, and I've since completed consulting projects for clients, including the Harvard Library, the Educopia Institute, and others. And I'm also the author of the Charleston briefing on library publishing, Library as Publisher, New Models of Scholarly Communication for a New Era. And for the book, one of the ways that I went about talking about library publishing was by conducting interviews with library publishers, one of whom is my co-presenter, Isaac Gilman.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. I'm Isaac Gilman. I'm the Dean of Libraries at Pacific University in Oregon, and I served on the inaugural board of the Library Publishing Coalition. And at Pacific, we've been publishing journals since about 2009, and we moved into book publishing when we founded the Pacific University Press in 2015.
Great. So I'm going to ask Leah to post our second poll. I'm curious how many of those of you who work in libraries already have launched publishing programs or are considering launching publishing programs. The Library Publishing Coalition routinely puts out an annual library publishing directory that lists over 116 libraries internationally who have library publishing programs currently, and this has grown. This number has continued to grow over the last decade or so. And I'm seeing a lot of people attending the webinar. About a little over 50% have an active publishing on their program on their campus, library publishing program. That's great. So our webinar today is titled, "Is it really publishing?" And this is a question that that comes up a lot when you read about library publishing, especially from the perspective of other scholarly publishers, university press publishers or commercial publishers. It's a question that I used to get a lot as the program director at the LPC when I would go to conferences and meet with people. And so I want to address this question both from the perspective of describing what it is that libraries are doing and asking whether we can call that publishing, and asking, does that matter? Is this purely a semantic distinction? Is it a question that we should be asking ourselves as librarians? So I'll give a brief overview. I'll start with a brief overview of the activities that libraries are undertaking that in the field we call publishing. I want to start by acknowledging a few of the instances in which libraries have actually created new university presses. These include initiatives like Lever Press, an initiative launched by the Oberlin Group colleges to build and sustain a digitally native platinum OA press that publishes works aligned with the liberal arts college ethos. The University of Cincinnati Press, which was launched by their library and that has a focus, quote, on publishing in social justice and community engagement. And a variety of other presses, including the press at Pacific University, which Isaac will describe in more detail later. So add to these the 30 plus university presses, existing university presses that now report to libraries. And I don't think there's any question that there are libraries directly engaging in what we can call traditional publishing, that is peer-reviewed, publishing peer-reviewed scholarship, often in both print and digital format, in established disciplinary areas, producing material outputs that look very much like what a university press or a commercial scholarly publisher produces. But as I mentioned, there are 116 library publishers listed in the library publishing directory each year and counting. And so what are the rest of these libraries doing? What are libraries who don't have a formal imprint or a formal press with it reporting to them? Or what are those who have a formal press doing that falls outside of those more traditional ideas of what publishing is? The typical model of publishing, library publishing, is quite simple. In the case of journal publishing, for example, a faculty member might approach the library with her content, such as an idea for a new journal in her field of expertise. And the faculty member will provide the disciplinary expertise necessary to identify an audience, to ensure a basic level of quality for the journal, and to build a pool of qualified peer reviewers and an editorial board. The librarian or librarians, in turn, provide the technology skills, the infrastructure for production and dissemination, and expertise in copyright and licensing, metadata, preservation, and other relevant topics. And the library's existing institutional repository typically serves as the publication's home. And so you might best describe many library publishing initiatives as publishing services, in that they put less emphasis on acquiring, managing, and owning a coherent publication portfolio, and more on providing the necessary technologies and support to facilitate content creation and dissemination of all kinds. The library is commonly providing a suite of services related to the processes of production, hosting, and distribution, as well as training, guidance, and advisory on technology, copyright, peer review, and other relevant topics. And the precise roster of these services varies widely depending on the skills and capacity of the library staff and the specific needs of the scholars and publications in the portfolio. And really the most basic level of service only requires that the library make available a publishing platform, such as an institutional repository or an instance of open journal systems. However, and most libraries are focusing on publications that come from within their campus community or are related to their campus community's interests, rather than developing discipline-based lists of titles like a traditional scholarly publisher. Library publishers favor lightweight workflows, often both by preference and by necessity. They focus on digital publication, often dispensing with print entirely. And notably, they eschew many of the services that most publishers consider integral parts of the enterprise. So things like notification of abstracting and indexing services, copy editing, typesetting, marketing, production of print copies, publicity, graphic design. These are the types of services, or these are the types of qualities in a publication that traditional scholarly publishers consider part of the inherent value that they provide, part of what makes a publication professional, scholarly, part of what builds the prestige and the identity of their press. And so library publishers often don't fit into that mold. They're also publishing, in some cases, peer-reviewed open access journals alongside student capstone projects, journals of undergraduate research, white papers, technical reports, and other types of gray literature. So a very broad portfolio, some of which is not the types of traditional peer-reviewed publication that most scholarly publishers produce. So though library publishers still account for a small fraction of the published scholarship, they're making notable contributions to the ecosystem. In 2016, the academic libraries inventoried in the Library Publishing Directory published a total of 685 individual journal titles, excluding undergraduate research journals, compared with my notes, the numbers in my notes don't match the numbers on my slide. So it's actually 817 journal titles published by libraries, a little over 1,000 published by US-based university presses, and an estimated over 28,000 total scholarly journal titles published in English annually. So again, this is a small contribution, but a significant contribution that libraries are making collectively, especially when you consider that each individual library may only publish a portfolio of maybe 5 journals individually, but collectively we're really making somewhat of an impact and helping work that might otherwise not see the light of day available to a broad public. So OA journal publishing is by far the most common activity for library publishers, but there are also many publishers also boast active monograph publishing programs and considerable work in publishing gray literature, data, student work, and digital humanities projects and websites. This is just a quick overview of the percentages of respondents in the Library Publishing Directory who publish each of these different types of scholarly outputs. So I want to come back again to this question of whether if given that libraries eschew the intensive processes of acquisition, editing, typesetting, all of these hallmarks of what publishers do, Ken Anderson famously updates his Scholarly Kitchen post frequently, and I think he's up to 96 discrete activities that publishers do. He has a running blog post of this. So if libraries don't do many of these 96 things that typical library publishers do, then is what they're really doing publishing. And I want to argue and just plant the seed that pushing the boundaries of what is considered publishing might in fact be one of library publishing's greatest strengths. Libraries are explicitly embracing experimental publications, media-rich content that's otherwise neglected, disciplines that may otherwise be neglected. And many libraries are embracing a mission oriented towards social justice and promoting equity in scholarly publishing. So I think this very question of whether what libraries do is publishing is helping to push the field forward in terms of notions of challenging established practices and hopefully innovating and developing new ways to make our scholarly communication system stronger ultimately, whether you're a library publisher or not. So we'll come back again to the question of, is it publishing at the end of my talk, of this webcast, but I want to address another pressing question for libraries, which is, should libraries publish? This is how Joe Esposito, the publishing consultant, poses the question, why would anyone want to get into this business when those of us who are already there were trying desperately to get out? Publishing takes a huge amount of labor, it's rarely profitable or financially sustainable at a small scale, and it seems to be in a constant state of crisis between technology disruptions, changes in reader preferences, and a saturated market. Meanwhile, the typical library budget is flat or declining, and new staff positions can be hard to come by. Libraries face no shortage of new demands on their time and capacity, from taking on campus data management support to developing information literacy programs that address the needs of 21st century learners. So is it wise in this context to take on another auxiliary function? Is it strategic to prioritize publishing when making difficult decisions about resource allocation? So I'm going to hand it over to Isaac, who has thought and written a lot about this area, to start answering some of these questions.
Thanks, Sarah. So it's true that libraries are facing increasing resource constraints, and this makes it even more important for us to ensure that the activities we're prioritizing directly support our institutional missions and also provide value to our students, to our faculty, and to the broader academic community. So using those dual criteria, publishing, I think, not only makes sense as a library activity, but it's also a logical strategic investment for libraries. Like university press publishing, library publishing is mission-driven. It's motivated by the belief articulated by Daniel Gilman, the first university president and founder of the Johns Hopkins University Press, on the screen here, that universities have an obligation to share knowledge outside of our walls. So libraries, I think, see an opportunity to partner with and extend the work of university presses. With fewer than 200 university presses in the US to support the scholarly and, while valuable, not generally commercially viable work of faculty and scholars at over 3,000 four-year institutions, there's a need for more mission-driven publishing. So it's logical for libraries to help meet this need. Not only do we have an existing mandate to share and make knowledge freely available to both our own students and faculty and to scholars and research sharing partners worldwide, but it's generally understood by our institutions that it's a wise investment for us to do so. And so we're not constrained in the same way by expectations of revenue or even cost recovery that university presses are. Beyond fulfilling our institutional missions to share knowledge, though, library engagement in publishing is, I believe, truly a strategic investment because it provides tangible benefits to our local and global communities. Historically, the unique value of libraries has been found in our collections, and to a certain extent, this is still true. But as some people like Scott Walter and Rick Anderson and others have noted in recent years, our collections of commodity content, the commercially available books, journals, media, and other resources that we purchase on the open market have become much less of a distinctive for individual libraries or institutions. As I've noted elsewhere, with seamless resource sharing and library consortia that are dedicated to shared collections, the redundancy of dozens or hundreds of libraries holding the same titles and same subscriptions is really easy to see and becomes increasingly difficult to justify from a financial perspective. Library publishing, on the other hand, provides an opportunity for libraries and for their parent institutions to make unique contributions to the content that's available globally. And because libraries, again, aren't constrained by profit or even by cost recovery sometimes, this means that we're able to publish works that don't fit in another publisher's list. And by doing so, we can help address gaps in the scholarly record and further add to the diversity of the global body of knowledge. So importantly, library publishing programs are also able to provide provide value to our institutions by supporting the ever-growing role of students and faculty and as authors and creators. By providing venues, services, and education that allows students to publish work, to engage in the publication process, and to learn about their rights and responsibilities as content creators, libraries can add value to academic programs, and I think we have the potential to contribute even further than we already do to student success. So, however, while there are clear benefits, I think, to library engagement in publishing, there are still some who question whether, as Sarah said earlier, it's an auxiliary function or whether it should become a core service area, joining kind of the big three of collection management, access services, and research instruction service. So it's impossible for me to say that specific publishing activities, like journal publishing or book publishing, digital humanities, should be core services at every college and university library. As the continuum of library publishing activities itself reflects, the publishing services that are appropriate for an individual institution will vary by the institutional profile and the needs of its students and faculty. So library publishing isn't going to look the same at every library institution. But I think, at least to me, it is clear that whatever the specific manifestation, libraries' role in partnering with students and faculty in the creation of new scholarly and creative work by providing tools, services, or publication channels has become a new core service area for us. And as colleges and universities are looking to distinguish themselves in an increasingly competitive landscape, library publishing services that engage students as creators, not simply as passive consumers of library collections, and library publishing services that support the growing emphasis on the applied liberal arts and sciences will become increasingly valuable. And Sarah, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Isaac. And so Isaac has started to address some of the kind of the motivations behind why libraries are getting into the business of publishing. And Leah, if you could post our next poll, I'm curious for those of you who are librarians and who either have or are considering launching publishing programs, what's driving that decision for you? What's your primary motivation? And we can't do a check more than one poll here, so I'm going to force you to just pick one. And I'm just curious about what are driving these decisions. And I'm seeing already disseminating unique content, providing value to the institution are both getting a lot of votes already. Those are still on top, but we're also getting a few votes for supporting teaching and learning, which I think is particularly in the liberal arts college context is a motivation that we see a lot. Addressing gaps or inequities in traditional publishing and experimenting or pushing the boundaries of traditional publishing is getting some votes too. That pretty much went right down the line from least to most popular there. And so I'll go ahead and ask our next poll question, actually, Leah, which is, should library should libraries consider publishing a core service? Is this something that you believe libraries should prioritize given the resource constraints and other responsibilities on your plates? I'm not seeing any definitely nots so far, so. But a lot of depends on the context. Great. So we've got about almost 80% saying depends on the context. Thanks, Leah. So Isaac talked a lot about the various values that library publishing provides on campus, and I just want to give a quick overview of what I feel library publishing provides in the scholarly publishing marketplace. How does library publishing complement other types of publishing? And this is kind of the way I think about it. We have large commercial publishers like Elsevier, like Wiley Blackwell or Springer, university presses, and scholarly societies who represent these high prestige, high visibility publishers with long histories, a lot of professional support, expertise in publishing, and often expertise in the disciplinary areas in which they publish. And I think there's a place for libraries alongside these publishers as a place to publish experimental content, to publish content that demands a service orientation where authors or editors want a lot of control over the final product that they produce, that provide the least restrictive licenses, that provide the least restrictive requirements in terms of what publications will look like, or how many pages they can have, or what kinds of media they can contain, because libraries are interested in these more experimental types of publication. They're often digitally native or digital first publication, and they're fully subsidized in most cases. And so they're not, as Isaac mentioned, concerned with revenue and what the potential cost benefit is for producing these publications. And libraries have an opportunity to address some of the gaps and flaws in the current publishing system. We have a publishing landscape that's dominated by a small number of large commercial publishers. We're seeing escalating prices, especially for journals in the hard sciences, high author fees, restrictive licensing, slow integration of the latest technologies, no place for certain types of important scholarship like gray literature and data sets, or a slow uptake of those types of publishing models. And so libraries really have a role to play in complementing and challenging some of these models through building their own. And as Isaac said, I think as a campus service, library publishing aligns well with the values and skills at the core of the library profession and represents a strategic means of fulfilling the library's commitment to access and stewardship. It's a natural complement to institutional repository services, data curation, digital scholarship services, scholarly communications, and information literacy programs. And it leverages the existing networks that librarians have on their campus to build deeper partnerships. So the question remains, I think, what is library publishing the right choice for your library? I think that this is actually a quote from Isaac that I used in the book, in which he says, you need to make sure that there's somebody other than you in your community who wants this to happen, meaning wants a publishing unit on campus. There's something to be said for being a visionary and being out in front, but I think it would be hard to build a publishing service if there wasn't some recognition from within your community that it was valuable or necessary. And so I think that's a really important thing to note, is that focus on the user and the community, and that truly is at the heart of what libraries do and are already good at, and that positions them really well to be publishers. So Isaac is now going to talk a little bit about what went into planning for the decision to launch a press and a library publishing program at Pacific University, and how they went about that process.
Thanks. So before I talk about publishing, I just want to briefly give you a little bit of background about Pacific University, because I'm going to assume that most of you never even knew that we existed before today. So Pacific University was originally founded as a school for orphans from the Oregon Trail, and it has carried forward that kind of ethic of service to the present day, which is reflected in its current mission, which is on the screen now, which states our dedication to inspiring our students to think, care, create, and pursue justice in our world. So broadly, supporting that mission, there are two foci for the university: preparing teachers, healthcare providers, and entrepreneurs to meet needs and to serve underserved populations, and then also equipping all of our students with an ethos of service and commitment to local and global communities. And so I think the library's focus on publishing, and specifically open access publishing, is intended to directly support Pacific's mission, ethos, and the educational focus of our institution. So the level of service that we provide varies, as we recognize that not every author or creator needs the same level of support or the same imprimatur on their work. This reflects our desire to meet the needs both of our local community and also of external authors who choose to publish with us. So as I have up on the screen here, our publishing services range from simple distribution, which I've labeled host, providing an opportunity for students and faculty to share work through our repository, which is called Common Knowledge, to, on the other end of the continuum, more traditional formal publication, which I've labeled publisher, through the peer-reviewed journals and books that we publish. We started a repository and also started publishing open access journals in 2009. And most recently, as I said in our intro, launched the Pacific University Press, which is a hybrid open access monograph press, in 2015. So the distinction that I'm making here on the continuum between publishing partner and publisher is somewhat artificial, but I think it reflects a difference in both the library's investment in and editorial responsibility for a specific publishing project. For example, we offer a la carte publishing services through a monograph self-publishing imprint that we're calling B-Tree Books. But those works aren't peer-reviewed, and they're generally receive no editorial support from us. Whereas in contrast, the Pacific University Press is more traditional in terms of its review and editorial process, and we make a pretty significant investment in time and money in the books the press publishes. But while I believe that it's important for our library to provide a venue for traditionally published, peer-reviewed scholarship through our journals and through the press, it's some of our more informal publishing partnerships of which I'm most proud, and which I believe provide the most unique value to our university and also potentially outside of it. I have a couple of the examples up here on the screen that I'll talk about briefly. For example, we've partnered with a professor in our College of Education who's working with indigenous educators in Guatemala to create early literacy texts in their own language. By providing online access to these books and related curricular materials, and we've even worked with the professor and the teachers in Guatemala to develop kind of copyright and intellectual property agreements to make sure that they own the rights to their work. We're helping support both the survival of an indigenous language and the efforts of educators in other dialects who are able to repurpose the materials that we make available online. The second example is we partnered with a sociology professor here at Pacific who teaches a critical race theory class. And he and his students early on in the class identified a need for children's books that directly and effectively address issues of race and allow families to have critical conversations about race. The students and both the faculty member felt there just wasn't anything out there that was meeting that need. And so we've worked with them to help the students format their books and make them available online through print on demand, basically taking what they're doing in the classroom and giving it the potential for a much broader impact, which is what they really want. So in those examples, and really in all that we do, we're trying to provide services that authors need, that provide value to our community, and that help to extend the mission of our institution at Pacific.
I'm going to unmute myself this time. Thank you, Isaac. And I think what you've heard throughout this presentation, I hope, and I think especially in Isaac's description of publishing at Pacific University, is that library publishing really starts with users. Publishing is not an end unto itself. Authors are creating their work with the expectation that it will be read. Publishers acquire and disseminate content with the expectation that it will find an interested audience, and they make every effort to ensure that it does. For libraries aspiring to launch publishing programs, I think defining these internal and external audiences is therefore a really essential first step. Who do you want to support on your campus? Who do you want to support beyond your campus? And how are you positioned to do that in your specific context? Internal audiences might include the faculty and students who produce publishable scholarly and creative works on your campus, institutions or institutes or research centers. They might include affiliated groups like university presses or community groups like local museums or historical societies. And external audiences are the groups of readers, no matter how small, who would find these works of interest. And so the questions that I think libraries need to ask themselves as they launch or grow their publishing programs are, why would an author publish with your library? Why would they choose your publishing service? That's your unique value proposition. And why and how will a reader connect with your publications? So for those of you who are thinking about launching publishing programs, I wanted to just offer a few first steps. How would you get started in thinking about whether this is the right fit for your campus and identifying, really zeroing in on the needs on your campus? The very first thing to do is undertake a publishing audit. Talk to faculty and students about their publishing needs and pain points. Look for currently published journals and other types of literature on your campus. Do a web search for OA journals, for collections of research papers or technical reports that are being published on campus. Just find out what's going on. It's a great way to identify potential collaborators who you know are already interested in publishing, but who may not be satisfied with their current options. Second, I think the advice that I heard as I conducted interviews for this book from the 6 library publishers who I interviewed was to start small, run a pilot, start with a few key supporters, people who you may already know or trust, or who have expressed a lot of enthusiasm about publishing with you. Developing a publishing program just can't occur in a vacuum. It's difficult to anticipate every necessary resource or to develop comprehensive policies and to gain the experience that you need and understand what the types of staffing resources and skills you'll need and the other things that you'll require without having some concrete ideas to put concrete projects, to put your ideas to the test. So I think the other thing is again, thinking about this question of why would an author publish with your library? In order to attract high quality publications and to build a robust market for your service as a library publisher, I think it's important to define your unique value proposition. What is it that you bring to potential authors and editors that they can't find elsewhere? Harriet Green, who is the English and Digital Humanities librarian at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, I think summed it up really well. She said that for them, their authors see a lot more, quote, behind the scenes and have more input throughout the process. Because our publishing program is nascent, our authors have a real chance to shape our workflows and how we work with them. We are truly author-driven. I don't know that a lot of commercial publishers can say that. So that's something that's unique, that's a unique value that they provide. Publishing programs also require high-level policies that address what kinds of authors the library will work with and the services that the library will provide, as well as a range of publication-specific contracts and MOUs that specifically elaborate the rights and responsibilities of the publisher and author or editor of each publication. And working through some of these policy documents can actually be a really productive way of asking some of these fundamental questions about your identity before you can have you'll need to decide, will we work with authors who are external to the campus if they approach us? Will we require our publications to use Creative Commons licenses or to be open access? Or would we take on a subscription publication if a faculty member had a subscription journal they wanted to host with us? I think going through these processes of developing policies around selecting and acquiring content, defining your service model, formalizing your roles and responsibilities, and developing publication-specific policies is a great opportunity to start thinking about your identity as a library publisher. So we will end with plenty of time for questions and discussion. I want to do one final poll, and that is, I'd love to hear what you think. Is it really publishing? Is library publishing really publishing? And I'd love to hear your comments about whether that matters as well. And you can put those in the chat window. So I'm curious about your thoughts about whether the idea of whether library publishing is really publishing is purely a semantic question, or whether that has implications for how we work as libraries. Thank you all for your time, and we welcome questions.
If you have any questions, please just put them in the attendee chat.
Matthew, I'm not seeing, I think there was a question, but I'm not seeing where to access it.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, here's one. Okay.
Is there a separate list of library publishers who are embracing a social justice mission for their publishing? I would appreciate knowing who they are so that I can offer a collaboration idea with them.
So I would direct you, I don't know of an actual list of library publishers with a social justice mission, but I would direct you to the library publishing directory, which asks libraries to share their mission statement. And I can tell you that a number of the mission statements of library publishing programs do specifically address social justice or equity in scholarly publishing.
Okay.
And I recommend reaching out as well to the LPC, to Melanie Schlosser at the Library Publishing Coalition as well, and recommend the LPC's resources to anybody on this webcast as well who wants to learn more about library publishing.
Another question. What is the most common type of friction the presenters have encountered between university presses and libraries publishing on the same campus?
Sarah, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to?
Well, Isaac, I was wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit about I think one tension is kind of for libraries who oversee presses, either ones that they've created or that have come into the library, is kind of maintaining a distinction between the formal, peer-reviewed, highly rigorous academic publications and other more informal library publications. I think that's a concern of some university presses, is making sure that they retain the prestige and the kind of weight that comes with the university press brand, and whether that gets muddied if it's if there's also a library publishing operation.
Yeah, I think, and again, I don't have personal experience with this friction since Pacific didn't have an existing university press before we started one in the library. But in conversations that I've had with others, this isn't really a type of friction, but more I think the most common cause of friction is a lack of communication. If there isn't an intentional effort to establish communication between the library and existing publishing units to talk about potential areas of duplication of effort or services, then that seems to lead to more fear and mistrust that maybe someone's territory is being infringed upon. But I think in all the instances where I've been aware of kind of these dual units existing and there being good communication, it's always seemed to be fruitful and has always led to opportunities to collaborate in new ways and to make sure that, I mean, both libraries and university presses have limited resources. And so things that can be done to either create efficiencies across those publishing programs or to make sure that they're not needlessly duplicating staffing or services has been productive. So yeah, I think you did identify the most common type of friction. I think the most common cause of that is has been a lack of communication or coordination.
Okay. Another question. Can you give examples of how libraries are promoting their self-publishing efforts? How are they attracting submissions as well as readership?
So I can talk just generally. Most library publishers are focused on publications that come from their campus community. So it's a lot of campus outreach that might be through the liaison librarians. I think on campuses where there's a liaison program, they can be really wonderful resources for identifying scholars, either students or faculty members who are interested in publishing or are interested in changing their publishing partner. Libraries are discovering all sorts of unique content on their campus that is that's just ready and waiting for a publishing partner. Whether it's, in some cases, it might be a journal that has only ever existed in print and it's run through a faculty department, and the library can help in digitizing that backlist so that content is now available online, for example, or flipping a journal to OA from a commercial publishing partner. So I think there's a lot of leveraging the existing networks that libraries have on campus, the knowledge that they already have of their scholarly community and the knowledge that they have of the content that the university is producing. Just mining the institutional repository as well, just kind of to get a sense of what's going on your campus in terms of publishing. So I think in terms of actually of the kind of acquiring content side of outreach and promotion, I think that's the big thing. Is there anything specifically you're doing at Pacific, Isaac?
No, I think, and because of our size, we're quite small, and our capacity is small, and so we've had plans for a while to go out and do more promotion of our services. But to be honest, we have the amount of work that we can handle right now just from our connections on campus, and also making connections through the networks of faculty at Pacific, of other kind of scholars and collaborators outside of the university. So far, we have been reliant entirely on word of mouth and informal connections, just because that's what we have the capacity to handle.
Okay, another question. Is there a general sense in the community about the way library publishers handle copyright issues with respect to their publications? Are there established policies you could suggest as fairly representative of how library publishers handle copyright? Who decides on the policies? The library, the university, if applicable, or the publishing unit?
I can take that if you want.
Please.
I can speak specifically to Pacific, and I'll try to extrapolate. I think there are two dimensions to that question. One, how are we handling copyright with regard to our authors and their rights in their work, but then also how are we handling rights issues for the use of third-party intellectual property that's integrated into the works that we publish. And I think my general assumption, partly because this is how we've approached it at Pacific, but also in conversations with others, is that library publishers are generally more ready to rely on fair use in terms of incorporating third-party intellectual property into the works that we're publishing. Not in a vacuum, though. I mean, at Pacific, I've had conversations with our general counsel about the level of risk tolerance of the institution and what they're comfortable with. But I think on the whole, libraries are more comfortable pushing that edge. And then on the author side, I think, again, being more in line with non-exclusive licenses to publish as opposed to copyright transfer, I think would be almost universal for library publishers, and providing different ways to license their work, whether it's a Creative Commons license or something else. So I think those are maybe the distinctives of library publishing in general, kind of very broadly in regard to copyright.
Okay, and I think this question also, Isaac, is for you. How many staff do you have at the University Press, and how many books do you publish a year?
So we're pretty small. I serve as the press director. We have an associate press director who probably spends about half of her time on the press and half the time on our journals, which are not technically part of the press. And then we use freelancers for a variety of other work, whether that's copy editing, design, that sort of thing. So there are only 2 warm bodies in our library who are involved in our press, and those are not even full bodies. Right now, we've only published 2 books so far. We are currently working on 3 at the moment, so we'll put out probably 3 books the next year. And my goal, or what I think we would be able to do without any additional staffing, we'd probably cap to around 5 titles a year. So we're a pretty lean unit. We are kind of picking the projects that we feel are worthwhile investment of our time and limited resources.
Okay, one more. Are there any common software platforms that library publishers are gravitating toward as their title management system or other internal systems for their business practice? There seems to me to be a great opportunity for library metadata integration that would lower costs for both libraries and publishers.
I think the question of these kind of internal something like a title management system, these kinds of internal softwares that larger scholarly publishers rely on are not something that have been adopted widely by library publishers. Many are using the institutional repository as their publishing platform, and so they're managing their metadata through the institutional repository. For journals, they would use the kind of integrated, the tools integrated into a repository platform like Digital Commons or a journal publishing platform like OJS, which are fairly robust. But my sense is that many library publishers are too small to use the commercially available title management and other kinds of business softwares that are available on the market. The Mellon Foundation has been funding a number of projects around kind of open source university press and library publishing software that I think may start to address some of these problems. Isaac, do you have any insight in that?
No, I think what you said was accurate, and given how I described our staffing earlier, you can probably assume that we fall into that category. A lot of the products out there are just a little too much, I can't think of the cliche, but just too much horsepower for us. Although we are I'm starting to feel a need to look at some platforms to help with royalty tracking and revenue. We are open access, but since we do print on demand, we do have royalty agreements with authors. And as we grow our list, it's going to be, I think, important to get a better system in place for that.
Okay. Do you feel that it is more useful to develop local decentralized programs or to pool resources to attempt to create an overall scholarly communication system?
That's a great question. And I guess I would say my first answer would just be why not both? I think both things are important. I think as you heard with Isaac's presentation and just even some of the responses to the polls, where publishing unique content is one of the real motivations for a lot of library publishers, and publishing and providing a service to the campus. So I think the idea that this is a campus-based service that serves campus needs is extremely important and one of the defining characteristics of library publishing. So if you took the local library out of the equation, I think you would lose a lot of that value. And I think you would lose the ways in which library publishers are particularly attuned to their authors and editors, and the ways that they work locally to meet the needs of their specific campus context and their specific campus community. And I do think that needs differ in different places. So I think you would lose a lot by having a kind of one-size-fits-all open infrastructure. At the same time, there are a lot of opportunities to pool resources, to build tools that perform the functions that library publishers need, and to work at a higher level than just at the campus level. And groups like the Library Publishing Coalition are facilitating that. Some of the projects that the Mellon Foundation is funding are facilitating building some of this open infrastructure. And then community-driven organizations like the Public Knowledge Project and their OJS software, which is commonly used in libraries, is very sensitive to the needs of the library community. So I think participating in those projects and making sure that library voices are heard in the development of publishing software and things like that is extremely important as well.
I think we have time for one more, and some aspects of traditional publishing seem poised for the modern scholars and some do not. If faculty members' scholarly work is being peer-reviewed, they have an advisory board, and are creating online articles using open source software, is this publishing?
Isaac, do you want to take that, or do you want to?
I'll just say yes. I mean, it all depends on how you want to define publishing, and I think what libraries are trying to do, as we mentioned earlier, is sometimes kind of push that definition, and that's not a bad thing. But I don't think libraries are the only ones who are or should be pushing that definition. I mean, certainly scholarly publishing has historically and should be driven by the community and by authors and researchers and scholars. And so the ways in which knowledge is shared that they find valuable should be what is publishing.
Okay. Well, I think that is all the questions. I think the only other question really is, will this webinar be available to be viewed later?
Hi, Matthew. Yes, it definitely will be. We're going to have the recording and the slides available on the Charleston Conference website. I would say by end of day on Friday, but definitely no later than Monday. If that is going to wrap it up our Q&A session, I really want to thank Sarah and Isaac and Matthew for being here, taking time out of your day It was a wonderful webinar. Thanks very much for participating. For our attendees, thank you for being here, for listening. We are going to have another webcast next month on reading in a digital age. It's going to be with Tony Harava, University of Ottawa, and David Durant from East Carolina University. So that will be, some more information about that will be on the Charleston Conference website as well. And there's going to be a survey. As soon as this webinar ends and the window closes, a survey will pop up. So please do give us your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Feedback not only on this session, but topics that you'd like to see for future webinars. So once again, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.